Hi there everybody, and welcome to another video. So today here at Daring Beefcake I have this mini Cooper R56 2009, and I'm gonna be changing the rear discs and pads in this car, and to do that I'm gonna start by getting the bonnet open here, and what we want to do is open the brake fluid reservoir, which is just hiding just there. So one thing to check here is that your fluid is not too overfilled, because sometimes what happens is as the pads go down, the fluid goes down, and occasionally people tend to top up the fluid, and if you top it up a bit too much, then when you come to change the pads, we need to push the pistons back. So this fluid will come back up, and if it's too full, then it will start overflowing. And if that's gonna happen, you either want to siphon some fluid out, or you can prepare yourself a little bit, put some paper around here so the fluid gets absorbed. And well, if it drips around, then you're gonna have to rinse it afterwards, because that fluid can be a bit corrosive. And if it drips, it will drip over the master cylinder and whatnot, whatever is in there, and it's gonna corrode the area. So if it drips out, then make sure you rinse it with water. Now here I can see this fluid is just below the max here, so we might just be okay with that. So anyway, this is what we're gonna do first. Open that, and we can leave the cap just there actually. The reason we want to open it as well is because obviously when you're pushing the pistons back, you're pushing the fluid back, and that pressure will be pushing this cap. If you don't take it out, it'll be very hard to push your pistons back, and also you may damage the actual master cylinder in there. So make sure you open that cap. And so now I'm gonna get the car up and remove the back wheels, which have a locking wheel nut as well, so you're gonna need that. Get your wheels off, and then we're gonna tackle those discs and pads. Okay, so I removed the wheel already, and I'm gonna show you how to do this side. The other side is exactly the same procedure. I'm doing this side because this side has the sensor here, the brake pad sensor, and the other side doesn't have a sensor. So technically it's a little bit easier to do, but it's the same sort of thing. Right, so I'm gonna start by removing these 13mm bolts here. So I've already undone that one, and we're going to undo the bottom one. And for that I'm using a 13mm, and I'm using a pair of pliers like this, so I can hold. So basically up here I was holding that there and undoing the bolt, because when you start undoing the bolt, this starts turning. Now you can get a spanner in here, but it's gotta be a fairly skinny spanner, otherwise it doesn't fit in there because it's not wide enough. And that's the reason I use this normally, because I haven't got a skinny spanner. So same procedure down here. I'm just gonna hold that in there, and I'm going to undo this bolt here, which might feel a little bit tight because it's got some Loctite in it as well, which we're gonna need to use when refitting these so they don't come loose. So that blue stuff there is some of that Loctite that sort of prevents the bolts from coming loose. Although in some cars they don't really use that, and I never really seen one come loose, but apparently it can happen. So I guess it depends on vibration and where you're driving, the road surface and stuff like that. So now we can sort of wiggle this caliper out. Okay, my camera is also wiggling. But we just want to get this out of here. Obviously it's under a bit of pressure because the piston is out. So just gently get it out and it should come out. Okay, there we are. So that's the old sensor here. We're also going to replace this sensor, and you may notice it's just attached here. So if you take that little cover out, that will come loose. Now if you look at this sensor, it's already started to wear out just there. It hasn't got to the point yet where the light comes on in the car, but that's the reason I wanted to change this. Although you may notice that these pads still have some life in them, but this the sensor, it's not far from triggering the light in the car. And the reason I'm changing this before that happens is because the car is being sold, so we don't want the new customer to have to face having pads coming in the the car requires parts in the next 3 months or 6 months or whatever. If we can prevent at least any issues with the car for at least 1 year, then we have some peace of mind, and so does the customer, and obviously they trust us. So just inspecting these little rubbers here, you want to just make sure they haven't got any pierce or any holes or anything like that, and make sure these pistons are moving freely. And you can remove these little sliders out. You can remove them. So if you pull that bit of rubber out, and you can actually pull them out, you can see if they have, this is nicely greased actually. Sometimes they go really dry, and you will sort of, when you pull this out, you will feel, and you then want to clean them and put some of that special grease, which is for these sliders, which is something like I think it's like moly grease, something like that. So just inspect those. They are okay. I'm not going to remove them. And in this case scenario, in this car, to get the disc out, you don't really need to remove the carrier here. You can actually slide the disc out from the side. But before we can remove the disc, we need to remove this little nut here, or, sorry, this little bolt, which is a Torx T50. So I'm just going to put a screwdriver in one of these holes so I can sort of lock the disc. Okay, that is out, and now we can sort of wiggle this out of there like that, and that's it, one disc out. these discs are a bit corroded, and also they are a bit worn now. That's the reason I'm changing the discs as well. Now you can get a wire brush, just wire brush this area a little bit. This one is not too bad actually. This car has been serviced every year, and it's got a little bit of grease around there. So I'll just put a little bit of copper grease back on here. And maybe a little bit on the thread where the bolts go in. And that is that. So I'm just going to cover that, because technically I should have really before putting copper grease in there, should have wire brushed this. So this is what we want to do. Now this wire brush is really hard. These metal bits are really tough. They're really hard. They can puncture like my gloves easily. So they can also puncture this rubber here. So when you're wire brushing here like crazy, trying to get all this out, don't go over the rubber there, or you're gonna pierce it, and then you're gonna have water going in there, and these sliders are going to seize in time. So don't go too crazy. Just wire brush the area, get rid of some of the dust in there. Don't need to go too mad, but here I have another wire brush which is a lot softer, and I can actually use it on this without damaging the rubber. So our new pads are going to sit on these metal clamps here, and sometimes you do get new ones of these depending on the make that you buy, but the ones I bought don't have those. And again, some makes actually come with new bolts, and then you don't have to be worrying about reusing the old bolts or using Loctite. So here we are. Just clean as much as necessary. You don't need to overdo it, because these brakes create a lot of dust anyway. So just gonna rinse the area with some brake and clutch cleaning fluid. Okay, so I've cleaned the area. I rinsed it with the brake fluid, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of copper grease around these, and I'm talking about a minute amount. Same there and up here, I've already done it. And yeah, just a little bit, so you know the pads slide in there basically. Now we also need to, your caliper here, we need to push the piston. So if I can bring this down a bit, we need to push this piston back, and for that I have this tool here. Basically this tool, the way it works, it's like that. It connects to those slots in the piston there with those two pins, and then this part goes in there. Then you can lock it into place. It's a bit of a fiddle because that happens all the time, so it's a bit annoying as well. But anyway, ideally you put that there, and occasionally you can just, if you can turn these by hand, then it's a bit easier, but sometimes it's difficult to turn by hand, to be fair. Or once you get it going, sometimes you can do it by hand. Right, so let's try to lock that a little bit in place, and then with a 19mm spanner you can sort of start turning that piston, and it will basically start going back into the caliper. And as you do, you sort of adjust this back and you keep turning the piston. Okay, so after a while fiddling with that, you're gonna manage to get that piston back in there. And so we can now progress. And we can fit our discs back in here. And obviously you just need to line it up to where the screw goes. And I'm just going to fit the little screw back in there. And I actually put a little bit of copper grease on this screw as well. So that little screw there is actually, it just sort of retains the disc in place so it doesn't rotate. When you try to put the studs in there, it doesn't rotate out of place. Cars like Toyotas, they actually have the stud out, and you put a nut on it, so they don't normally have this screw. So ideally you don't want to over tighten that screw, because in time, if it gets corroded, then it becomes very hard to remove. So that's why also I put a little bit of copper grease on the actual thread and put it in, so we can try to avoid those issues. And since we are sort of handling the disc, you can rinse it a little bit, just make sure it remains sort of clean. You will then have your pads. These are Apex blue, and then those slide in there. This side is slightly different. You can see it's a little bit more round here, the shape. So that side goes on the side of the caliper. And that is that. Now we can fit our caliper in there. So in order to get it in here, you may need to push the little sliders in a little bit. So here I have some of that Loctite. I'm just going to apply to the bolt for refitting. So obviously I want to get these bolts in before that Loctite dries. Now I was checking the torque setting for these bolts for the mini rear calipers, and it was showing something like 35 Newton meters. So that is something that you can easily verify in Google, so you can have a look yourself. You may find a different figure, but the usual figure is something like that. It's 30 or 35 Newton meters. I'm not using a torque wrench, but it's a good idea and it's a good practice to use one if you haven't done this previously, or you haven't. I mean, I'm always doing this kind of job, so sort of get the hang of it. And I'm using a fairly small ratchet here, so I cannot over tighten these or damage them. The last thing you want to do is break that bolt or that one into the slider, and then, well, you have to order all the parts, and then you're stuck obviously until you can actually get those parts. So where possible, use a torque wrench, or if you haven't got one, just don't over tighten that. And we're pretty much done here. So the last thing is just to replace this sensor. So this sensor, all we want to do is, so if we look at this sensor, you just want to follow it and disconnect it from wherever it needs to be disconnected, which is basically attached to the ABS sensor here. And you keep following it, keep disconnecting it like so, and eventually it goes to the back here. You can see it's the white one here. And you want to sort of try to you want to kind of press this little clip there and take it out. So I'm gonna try and do that from down here. So you can actually, you can pull the sensor down here, so it makes it easier when pulling it out from when disconnecting it here. So there's the clip on this side. You sort of want to press that clip there and unplug it. So I'm gonna do that now. So I just got my new sensor here, and I just follow it through everywhere I've disconnected the old one and just connected the new one. That way we know exactly where the old one was, and we just plug the new one in. And you may, I don't know why, I have a cable tie just here. The cable tie is holding this sensor and the speed sensor together. So I may have to put a small cable tie there, but I think all of these here now goes without saying. All I'm going to do is plug the new sensor into this socket, and this can only go one way, by the way. So for example, it won't go in that way, it will go in that way. Plug it in, that's plugged in, and then it's gonna go back in the socket up here where it came from. And that is that. So up here, the old sensor has a little cable tie somewhere just there. So I'm gonna cut that off, and I'm gonna cable tie the new cable, and then remove this cable. So, which is out already, and this here is gonna slot in there basically. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to push in, and to be honest, you want to push it in also carefully, because it tends to, sometimes they break. Okay, that's clicked in, so it's nice and secure. And then that bit goes there. And we're pretty much done. So I'm just going to remove that, and we can then, I'm going to put the wheel back on. Then we can lower the car and reset the computer as well. So I've already done this side as well. Just got the wheel back on there. You can see the new disc and pads. So anyway, I'm gonna get on with this. So wheels are on. First thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to pump the brakes a few times here, because it's going to go all the way in. So just make sure you pump it a few times until it's hard. Then you can check the brake fluid here. You may notice it's gone up a bit. So in this case it has gone up, but not dramatically. So I can go ahead and close that. Lock that in place. And now we're gonna need an OBD computer to reset the brakes at the back. So I'm gonna get my computer now. Okay, so just checking the car's computer here, we can see the items that need maintenance. Most of it is 2025. The front brakes are in 21,000 miles, and so the rear brakes, you may have seen here, had about 700 miles left on them. So that is what we want to go ahead and reset. So I've got my computer here, and we can go ahead and reset that. So by the way, I'm using a launch computer, Launch Pro here, and it's gonna take a few minutes to log in. So maybe I'll come back once this is in. While this is loading, I'm just gonna show you how you can access the menu that I was in here actually. So I've got the ignition on, the car is not running, just ignition, and there's this BC button here. If you press it a few times, you're gonna get to a menu that says set info. Now if you press and hold that button, is going to go to check info. You can release that and then flick that same button again, service info. So press and hold and release, and that is going to take you to that menu where you can check all the items that have been serviced or need to be serviced. So in this case, obviously I'm going to do that, but you can't do it from here. So it needs the use of the computer here, where we go to special function, maintenance, and CBS reset. So I'm gonna try to keep this alive for a few seconds so we can see the change, but I'm waiting for that to load so we can do it. In the meantime, I'm gonna keep pressing this button because otherwise it comes out of the menu. Right, so here we are. So it says rear brake F3. So I'm gonna press F3 there, and it's gonna go through the process of resetting. And now it says rear brake 100%. So actually this came out of the menu, so we're just gonna get back in so I can show you that has been reset. Oh, there we are. So that was front brakes, rear brakes, 37,000 miles now. So that's pretty much it. So now we can actually really finish with all of this. I'm just going to, before we release the car, I'm going to check for fault codes and see if there's anything that needs to be deleted. You can see some faults there, but I changed the battery on this car as well, and sometimes when you disconnect the battery it generates a fault code. And also this ABS may have been generated from me disconnecting the rear brake pads as well. So if we have a look at this, interface instrument, panel signal fault, ambient temperature sensor, brake light impossible, selector lever interlock. Now I actually removed this selector lever the other day because I'm going to replace it as well, because this one is a bit broken. So all these things I need to reset, and I've also changed some bulbs. So if we reset everything and we can check it in a few days, and if anything comes back then we can deal with it. But so far it all looks okay. So having said that, I hope the video helps. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you all in the next video, which will be in this mini as well. I'm going to be changing the alternator belt, so keep an eye for that.